Welcome to another episode at the Fitness Oracle. Today we sit down with Cheryl L Ilov from Cheryl Ilove International. She is an author, speaker, dancer, martial artist, and a recovering physical therapist. She is also a former chronic patient who was told by the experts that she had no hope of recovery and she would never have the life she wanted or had before. She was also told to start applying for disability because she was going to need it. Apparently, the experts were wrong, and she had a complete recovery once she fired them all and figured it out all on her own. This is a great episode. We talked to another martial artist who has an amazing story. And in this episode, we talk about the power of healing through movement, how to become your own expert, self-awareness as keys to success, what we believe is what we become, and that you're stronger than you think. And we use martial arts as a platform to be able to create this, to use these tools that we talk about. And I know you guys are going to love this episode. It's filled with amazing amount of golden nuggets. And as usual, grab a pen and paper, grab a cup of Joe, and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Fitness Oracle, where we have real conversations with real people just like you, with real stories just like yours. And this is one of their stories. I am your host, John Katsavos. My guest today is Cheryl Ilove from Cheryl Ilove International. Cheryl is an author, speaker, dancer, martial artist, and recovering physical therapist. She is also a former chronic pain patient who was told by the experts that she had no hope of recovery and she would never have the life that she wanted or had before. She was also told to start applying for disability because she was going to need it. Apparently, the experts, and I am using air quotes, were wrong. And she had a complete recovery once she fired them and figured it out on her own. She started training in an ancient Japanese martial art at the tender age of 47, but did not go willingly because she knew she was going to hate it. 10 years later, she became her teacher's first female black belt. Cheryl, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It's an honor to talk to you again.
Yes, I really had a lot of fun on your podcast. Thank you for inviting me. That was really fun.
Yeah, you're so much fun to talk to. I loved hearing your story and your perspective. It was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. How's Colorado in the fall? I've never been there, so I have no idea.
It is glorious. It was 75 degrees today, sunny, not a cloud in the sky. The trees are turning, so we do get a lot of the different colors, the gold and the reds. Yeah, it's just fabulous. It's just wonderful.
Very
A little
nice. Here,
dry, a little dry, but that's okay.
that's okay. That's okay. Here in
Yeah.
Florida, it was 66, which I
Wow.
was shocked. I'm like, why is this so cold at 66?
Uh-huh.
but but enough of the weather.
hmm
What got you
Hilarious.
started in martial arts in the first place?
Oh my goodness. Boy, that is just such a long story. As you said, I began at the tender young age of 47. 3 years earlier, I met a man. He was an acupuncturist, and he was referred to me from one of my own clients who said, "Oh, you'd really like him. He's really good. Give him a try, blah, blah, blah." I was having some physical issues and a lot of emotional and mental issues at the time, too, but I was trying to hide it for many, many reasons. But anyway, it's like, okay, I'll give this guy a try. So I went to his office, and the very first time I went to his office, and he started to put needles in my legs, he got a very far away look on his face, and he said, "You know, with your legs and my coaching, I could teach you how to kill with these things." And I'm lying there on the table thinking, who thinks like that, let alone says it out loud? And I thought, where's my purse? I need to get out of here. This guy's absolutely insane. Well, I had needles all over me. So he literally had me pinned to the table. I was a captive audience. So unless I wanted to try running out the door with needles sticking out all over me, I was pretty much stuck there. So I tried to compose myself and not show how horrified I was. And I says, well, thank you for thinking of me, but no, I will save my killer legs for ballet class. And I have absolutely no interest in any kind of martial art. Ugh, I'm a fussy girl. I like things like tutus and toe shoes and Pilates and pedicures. And martial arts was just never on my radar and certainly not in my DNA, or so I thought. Anyway, every single time I went to for a treatment, this guy would go on and on and on about his art, his martial art, and how wonderful it was, the art of the ninja. And he kept trying to get me to start training with him. And I thought, you're out of your mind and you're barking up the wrong tree, because I am never going to take martial arts ever. Well, and that didn't stop him. He kept talking about it and kept trying to get me to train with him. So he had a martial arts school, a dojo right next to his clinic. So it was kind of like a duplex. And yeah, again, I kept saying, no, it's never going to happen. Well, what he didn't know was about 3 months before I met him, I had had a very traumatic experience. And when I tried to report the experience and get help, I was shut down by everybody I approached, including people who were very close to me, telling me that couldn't have happened. You're making it up. You're exaggerating, blah, 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 all the horrible things that people tell victims, I mean, and I don't really consider myself a victim, because apparently I made a very poor victim. But because of that, I just, shoved it deep inside of me, put a big smile on my face, pretended nothing was wrong, and just went about my life. Well, about a year later, as trauma often does, it just came spewing out of me. And for some reason, I felt like I could tell Mark, my acupuncturist. Well, when I did, of course, he started treating me then with acupuncture and herbs for some of the symptoms I was having. And then his campaign to get me on the mat went into high gear. But I kept saying no, because I didn't understand how hanging out in a smelly dojo with a bunch of sweaty men, trying to punch me, kick me, throw me, pin me, and choke me was going to make me feel any better. And he kept telling me, you don't understand. There is such an incredible healing power in the martial arts. And I'm going, you don't understand. This is never going to happen. Well, it took, people call me stubborn. It's a toss up to see which one of us is more stubborn, because he never gave up. And he hounded me and hounded me until finally he wore me down. And I said, okay, I will take a few classes, because I really felt like some self-defense techniques would not be a bad idea. I'll take a few classes, learn a few techniques, and then I'm going to quit, because I knew I was going to hate it. And 10 years later, I became his first female black belt.
That's amazing. You brought up so many amazing talking points that I want to dive into.
Sure.
We've touched up on this when I was a guest on your show, and I want to get your perspective. But before we do, I have some other leading questions.
Sure.
Have there ever been days where you wanted to quit?
Yeah. Yes.
What keeps you
Many
coming
times.
back?
There is something so seductive, and I cannot speak for any other martial art, because this is the only one I've ever studied, is Ninpo Taijutsu. But there was something so seductive and so compelling about that art. And, maybe it's in other arts as well. As I said, I don't know. But no matter how discouraged I would get, no matter how triggered I got, because I did get triggered a couple of times. And a lot of times that even came at a higher level of my training, when I was actually triggered by my sensei, which was really difficult to work around. And, I would maybe take a day or two off, and then I would go back, because there was something about the art. And I tell people, I never went looking for the art, obviously, but the art came looking for me. And once it found me, it was not going to take no for an answer. And it was almost like this relationship that I had not only with the other martial artists, but with the art itself and the history, the philosophy, but the feeling and the sense of strength and empowerment and confidence that I was getting through training was something that I had never experienced ever to that degree in my life before.
Yeah, I get this question a lot from other podcasters that are not martial artists.
Mm.
What's the best martial art out there? And it's just one of the hardest questions to ask because to answer because it really depends on the person. I think you hit it right. You hit the nail right on the head on that. It's that when you just know what's right for you. It's the art that helps you build your confidence, build
Mhm.
your ability to move in this world, and be confident in your movements.
Mhm.
Um, I want to talk about the healing power through martial arts, specifically martial arts, because it as destructive as people think and it looks like, and it is destructive. You're trained, and I am trained to learn how to kill people.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
on the flip side, and I had a big struggle with this about 10, 15 years ago. On the
Mhm.
flip side, you're also learning how to heal people.
Mhm. Absolutely. And this fit in so beautifully with my physical therapy practice at the time because I was a non-traditional physical therapist. The traditional PT just never really spoke to me. I hated it. Um, when I was on the receiving end of PT, I don't know why I thought that I would love it as a physical therapist myself. But I loved anatomy, I loved movement, I loved kinesiology. And once I finished graduate school, I just went out on my own and did my own thing. So I was specializing in Pilates-based rehabilitation and conditioning. And then I added another modality called Feldenkrais, which the person who created and developed Feldenkrais, his name was Moshe Feldenkrais, was a martial artist himself. So a lot of the principles of martial arts was in Feldenkrais and vice versa. So it really kind of took my understanding, my curiosity, and my passion to another level because I saw how these two movement arts were so beautifully intertwined. And, as far as the healing power, oh gosh, I didn't feel it at first. Of course, this is a long, as you told me when you were on my show, you don't just flip a switch and all of a sudden you're better. It's definitely a trajectory and it has its ups and downs as you're going through this process. But it was just, even after my very first class, and I had no idea what I was doing, of course, and I was, the class idiot, but I giggled the entire way home. I was terrified during class because I had no idea what was going on. I was the only woman there, even though Mark had assured me there were plenty of women in class. Now, he may have exaggerated or he may have confabulated intentionally just to get me on the mat. I don't know. To this day, I still don't know. But once class was over and I was in my car and I was driving home, I just giggled the entire way home. And I hadn't giggled in a very long time. And I couldn't figure it out and I didn't even try to. I just, had paid my month's tuition and just went back. I think I was taking 1 or 2 days a week. And I thought, okay, once the month is over, I'm done. I'm out of here, getting back to my life as it was before. And I was shocked. And I think even Mark was shocked, but pleased to have me write out that check for that second month. And after I had been training for 3 months and, training air quotes again, because what I was doing, I was just learning a few things and I was moving on with my life. I didn't consider myself training. So after about 3 months of this, one of the guys started to badger me to test for my yellow belt. And it was like, no, I was never going to test. I never had the goal of getting a black belt. I never even wanted a yellow belt. I never even wanted the white belt, but it came with the uniform, so I had to take it. And I'm going, I'm not going to test. He started badgering me until finally it was like, I will test just to get you to shut up. So already at this point, I think some of the guys were figuring out my personality because that's how Mark got me on the mat in the first place. And this guy just figured he would wear me down. So I did my first test. And 3 months later, that same guy badgered me to test for my second-degree yellow belt. I'm going, why don't you mind your own business? And what's all this big deal with testing? And I just didn't get it. But again, to shut him up, I did my second degree yellow belt test. And something really weird happened. About 3 months later, I'm looking at the belt rack in the dojo and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm ready for my orange belt. And nobody had to badger me to test. It was my own idea. And from then on, I started climbing the ranks slowly at first, but even as I got higher, I had started to accelerate. And that same sense of empowerment and confidence and even courage and inner strength slowly began to develop and become, at first it was such this fragile little thing, but then all of a sudden it would get stronger and stronger as time went on.
I'm going to circle back a little bit and see if we can connect the dots a little bit here. You said something earlier about having the victim mentality. Do you think
Mhm.
something like that would have influenced your decision not to get your yellow belt and your second degree yellow belt? But when you saw that you could achieve it, that you could move forward?
I'm not sure because I think, as far as like the victim mentality, one thing I learned through my entire experience of what I went through and going through the trauma is I discovered that, wow, I really make a very bad victim. Because, I was pissed as hell. I was pissed at hell that it happened. I was furious that the people that I was going to for help were just not listening to me and turning me down. I mean, I was furious. And even I did try and, go to therapy because that's what you're supposed to do. And the therapist said to me, I am so impressed with how angry you are. And I'm like, whoa, it makes sense to me that I would be angry. He said, no, most people would be afraid and most people would be scared and most people would be, I'm like, well, I guess I'm not most people. I am just angry. But of course, I was experiencing all the symptoms, of PTSD, mostly because I really believe that if I had had even one person, one that would have listened to me and said, okay, this is what you're going to do, and this is how we're going to get help. This is how we're going to report it. One person to support me, I never would have gone through the vortex of hell, is what I call it, of PTSD.
Do you think it's important for somebody to do something to go through that, to live through that, to live through that kind of darkness?
Well, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but you can't have, like we talk about this at the dojo, and I had this conversation with somebody else this morning. You can't have the light without the darkness. The darkness is there. And once you walk into the darkness and you embrace it and accept it, we talk about acceptance versus resistance in martial arts, or at least in our art. I'm sure you do too. And once you have that acceptance that that darkness is there, and once you have walked through it and come out the other side, life looks a whole lot different. And you look at yourself much differently as well. I mean, you have your own experience of walking through that dark path. And I think that, it's not something I would wish on anybody, but let's face it, life is full of hits, life is full of traumas, and we all have our fair share of them. So learning how to be able to cope with it and come out on the other side, um, it's frightening, it's hard work, but it is incredibly empowering and such a valuable experience full of life skills and tools that you can carry on through the rest of your life.
I love how you said that. I absolutely love how you said that. It's
Mhm.
important to go through it. And it kind of explains, like, because I was having the same experience when I first started Sistema, that I would be
Mhm.
walking home and I would be giggling on the way home. And I'm like, I'm so happy. I'm so happy I took some of the hardest punches I've ever had in my life. It made me feel so light. It's like, what else? How much worse can this get?
Exactly. Well, that wasn't quite like my experience, especially at first, because they treat you with kid gloves at the very beginning when you're a brand new student, and especially wanting to, as a woman, wanting to keep me coming back. And I was fortunate that not only did I land in the art that was perfect for me, but also the dojo that was perfect for me. Even though there were very few women there, and most of the time I was the only one in class, these guys absolutely loved women and they loved having women in class. I know I've heard horror stories about some dojos, but I mean, the other thing, we talk about playing a lot. The very first time I heard that was when my very first class, and Mark plucks one of the black belts out of the line and starts beating the crap out of this guy. And I was just, I mean, I closed my eyes. I couldn't stand to watch. And just the sound effects were enough, the screaming, the punching, the kicking, the key eyes. And all of a sudden, the grand finale was the sound of a body being slammed to the mat. And I'm going, where's the door? I'm out of here. And then, Mark said, okay, everybody pick a partner and play. And I'm thinking, if he calls this play, I would hate to see him fight because that would absolutely be a nightmare. But, it took a while to get used to that. But of course, when they were attacking me, first things we learn is evade, get out of the way of an attack, right? So if you're not there, you can't get hurt. And I was so good at it because anytime one of the guys went to attack me, I would throw my gi top over my head and run screaming off the mat, going, don't touch me. So they would say to Sensei, they'd say, hey, she's cheating. She won't let me attack her. And he just looked and he would shrug and he'd say, well, she got out of the way, didn't she? And that's the point. And besides, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So it wasn't until later that they were starting to, treat me, put the locks on a little harder, put the chokes on a little harder, put the grabs, put the pins. But yeah, anytime that somebody has you in a choke and you can get out of it and take them down, it's very exhilarating. Or my favorite was when we did floor work and, one of the guys would pin me. And of course, they would teach me how to get out of it. And then they would hold the pin harder and harder. I mean, it's exhilarating. It's so visceral to move your body like that. And to be able to have that kind of, I don't want to even say strength because look at me. I mean, I'm not that strong, really, 5'7", 128. I have a few muscles and that's nice. But I can't outpower a cat. But what they taught us or taught me was how to move from my structure and to use my structure to be able to protect myself and get out of, to be able to counterattack. It's beautiful.
I think you nailed again. You made up a really good talking point right there, and I also know a woman who's like 5'8", 100 pounds soaking wet, and I talked about her, and she was an instructor, and it's about trusting your body that it knows the answer to whatever you throw at it. Do you think that is like one of the phases for trying to understand that you are an expert? You're an expert in yourself and in your body.
Absolutely. I would never consider myself an expert in martial arts. I don't consider myself an expert even in dance, and I've studied ballet and still take ballet classes for over 40 years. But I do consider myself an expert in my own self. And that's what I even tell a lot of my clients, the same thing. Be your own expert because nobody knows you as well as you do. And when somebody is trying to put on, like superimpose different labels on us or different, names or whatever, or things that we can and cannot do, that's when we start to lose our way and we start to lose that sense of that inner knowledge and wisdom that we have deep inside of us.
That's really great, but it's also understanding how to utilize every inch of you. Like the lady that I spoke to you about in your podcast, I told the story about how she took down a guy 3 times the size of her. And it is possible because she understood what she could do. She could take 128 pounds, 120 pounds, 100 pounds, and put it all in her little fist.
And when all of that focus and intention is concentrated on that tiny little fist, I mean, how do you think people break bricks? I mean, we don't do that in our art, and I don't ever want to try, but that's how they do it. All of that energy, all that power, all that focus goes into that one little, you know, 3 inches or whatever it is to penetrate steel.
Big effect on being self-aware, understanding
Mhm,
what you can do, what you cannot
mhm.
do. Is that right?
Absolutely. And it's listening to yourself and not what anybody else is telling you you can or cannot do. Because there's plenty of people out there who are going to tell you what you cannot do because they know. And that's actually what happened when I started training. I'd go to ballet class and some of the dancers would see some of the bruises like on my wrists from wrist grabs and stuff. And it's like, you can't do this. You're going to get hurt. You shouldn't do martial arts. You're going to get hurt. Well, these are the same people that when I was really suffering were just like, get over yourself. Nothing bad happened to you. So it's like, why am I going to listen to you? But yeah, it's just really it's really interesting what people will try and tell you about yourself.
And if you don't mind sharing, what happened to you?
Oh God, it's just so crazy. Well, basically, in a nutshell, I was 44 years old and, top of my game, man. I just, I'd finished physical therapy school just 4 years earlier. And I'd finally gone out on my own, opened my own practice. I'd finally lost all the weight that I had gained during my chronic pain syndrome. And then sitting on my butt in PT school and studying for 2 years, I was in great shape. Everything was just, I was on the top of my game. Everything was just wonderful. And I went into a doctor's office for a routine visit. Somebody I'd never been to before, so I didn't know him. And when I walked in, I was a healthy, vibrant 44-year-old woman. And when I walked out, I was a statistic. He was a sexual predator. Yes. And of course, as a physician, he has the perfect cover, right? Because you have to do things. I mean, it was so bizarre and so weird. And so this was, oh my gosh, it's been over 20 years. It's been about 22 years that it happened. But I mean, it was just really bizarre. And even people would say, well, where was the nurse? You should have had a nurse in the room. And it's like, hey, guess what? Spoiler alert, she was part of it. It was like they had it was a team that they had. And I knew, even though I was shocked, I was horrified. I did have some injuries from it. And even though in all of that confusion and the shock and the horror and the pain, I knew that I wasn't the first woman he did this to. And I knew I would not be the last. And I was so upset because I thought, why didn't anybody else report him? And that was my main goal, is I wanted to make sure that I got it on record that I reported him so that I could stop other women from walking into his office. I mean, it was just, it was really, it was crazy. But then with the fact that nobody would believe me, and even, like I said, people who were very close to me, my very best and dearest friend in all the world, who we are not friends any longer. And even my own husband was like, well, no, he says, I don't want to hear this. Go talk to your girlfriends. And it was just really a tough time. And so that's why I just stopped talking, I stopped trying to get help, because what's the point? The way I was treated afterward, I think, was probably just as traumatic, maybe even more so, as the incident itself.
It almost sounds like you were crying out for help, but nobody would believe you.
Yes, that's exactly it. I was crying and screaming for help.
But does do you think it's because of the doctor, because of the doctor's position as a doctor? He's, you know, someone who helps people. I
Mhm,
am using air quotes for those that are listening
mhm.
in. I am using air quotes. I mean,
Yeah.
I have full faith in physicians out there that the majority of them are uh,
Mhm,
good. Uh,
mhm,
but do you
mhm.
believe that the position, other people's perception of him, they're like, oh no, you shouldn't talk about that stuff, kind of stuff?
Oh, no, not really. I think that what had happened, when I finally just really, really fell apart. I had remembered a client I had worked with, and she was a psychiatrist, and she and I had gotten along really well. She came to me for back pain, and we had a really good relationship. And it was like, okay, I'll call Ruth. So that's what I did. And when I went to see her to tell her what happened, and that was about a year and a half after the incident, it was the first time I was ever able to tell the entire story to anybody. So I was able to tell her the whole thing, and she just said, there are a lot of really sick people in the medical field. And it's like, I didn't even realize that. And I had been in the medical field myself, since I graduated from respiratory therapy school in 1978 from a 4-year program. So I was around, hospitals and working, critical care, all of these different. So I knew that, people are people, but I had no idea. And so some of them are a little sick and some aren't, but I had no idea how prevalent it really was in the medical profession. And then I found out, how much the medical profession, especially physicians, will protect each other and will cover for each other. And it wasn't until, gosh, so all this happened, when was it? It was in 2000. So 16 years later that one of my clients, who became a close friend of mine, sent me an email, and it was an article. I think it was the Atlanta Journal that had done a study on physician sexual abuse and sexual assault. And the results were absolutely staggering. I had no idea how prevalent it really was.
That's I used to work in a hospital.
Mm.
I don't know that part. I just fix their computers and fix their printers.
Uh-huh.
John, my cell phone's not working. All right, bring it here. Um, something like that for somebody, I could see, I could see that being a very big motivator for someone to be angry.
Mhm.
And in all right, you had the right to be angry.
Mhm.
Was it affecting um that anger? Did it show itself in different ways? And did it take over your life in certain ways? What happened?
I would say that the anger did not, at first it did, but then I think the anger led to depression. It led to deep distrust, uh, which is pretty understandable, of not only, people that I didn't know, but even, people around me. And I was very careful and cautious not to show my emotions about anything. I kept everything to myself. So I turned everything inward. So it was, I think that anger turned into, fear, depression, sadness, incredible distrust of other people, but even the inability to trust myself, because this is really kind of weird. But when I went for that appointment that day, for some reason, I remember standing outside the door. I had my hand on like the door to open the door to walk into the office. And I could feel like the hair on the back of my neck starting to, stand up. And it was like, there was like this inner voice that said, don't go in there, walk away. And of course, it's like, oh, come on, you're just overreacting. You're nervous, blah, 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 blah. But I remember that it was palpable. And it was almost like it hit me in the face. It's like, don't go in there. So, and since that time, boy, do I listen to my intuition and I follow it. If that means that I look foolish, that ship has already sailed. I don't mind looking foolish. I don't mind looking stupid. It's okay. I don't care if you call me, whatever. That's fine.
I've had that so many times in my life, so many times.
Mm.
And most of the time I listen, sometimes I don't listen. How do you help people learn to trust that intuition, that instinct? Because it
You
just
know,
it seems like a level of self-awareness for people.
it is definitely self-awareness. So what I do when I work with people, and even if I do like a self-defense class for women, I do those a lot. Um, I just tell them to put away their devices, go outside where it's safe in their yard, close their eyes, take the time to really listen to the sound of the birds. Listen to the sound. I call it sound layering. And I love to do this in the yard where I just kind of close my eyes and I can hear the dogs barking in the distance. And I can hear, if I listen a little bit more, oh, there's the traffic. And you just, that sound layering. So it really increases that sense of sensory awareness of your hearing. And then I'll do the same thing with my eyes closed. The sensation of the feel of the sun on my skin or the wind, just that type of sensorium. And I do that with all of my senses. I open my eyes and I look at the different colors and just really engaging that sense of awareness. And then I would even practice that at the grocery store when I first started really focusing on my self-awareness. I hate the grocery store, full disclosure. I want to get in, get out. There were times when I had it down to the point where I could leave my house, get through the grocery store, get back home in less than an hour. And that was a good day. But then I thought, you know what? I'm going to change things around. So instead of going through the produce section and going through the grocery store that way, I would go the other way and I would go backwards. And there were so many different things that I noticed in the store that, things that I could make for dinner or whatever. And it was just really like lighting up my nervous system. So then I started going to different grocery stores and it was like, wow, it was a whole new experience. Starting to take a different route when I drove to my office because you see different things. And even such simple, easy steps can really train your awareness in a way that you're paying attention to so many different things. And I would always tell the moms, play this game with your kids, go to the park and see what you can notice. Look at different people and say, what are they wearing? Or what kind of a day are they having? So there are really fun ways you can turn it into game to start practicing self-awareness.
I love it. It's almost like start paying attention to the white noise.
Exactly.
I want to move on a little bit, and I want to talk about this really great concept that you have, and it applies to everyone. You're stronger than you think. Are you talking just about the physical or the mental or both?
I am talking physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, all of it together. You as a whole person, you have no idea how much strength and power you have inside of you. And you just have to find a way to access it.
I'm nodding because I'm total in agreement with you.
I figured you would be.
I want to also talk about are you a big fan of testing your physical, emotional, spiritual limits?
Ooh. I would have to say, oh gosh, no. No. I mean, no. But the truth is, I guess so. People tell me that I'm a really adventurous person, and I think I'm probably one of the least adventurous persons, that I know, or people that I know. I think I would really rather be upstairs, with my knitting needles and just, listening to music or whatever. But yeah, I put myself out there in ways that I never ever thought that I would. I was not always this confident. And, even like in my mid to late 20s and 30s, I had no confidence. And I think that comes from being in a ballet class surrounded by people who had been dancing their entire lives. And, it was the work that I did. I was a supervisor, a shift, manager at the hospital I was working at. And man, you just get nailed for everything. You get blamed for everything. Come from a big family. I have 4 sisters. When I would go home for visits, it was like, let's, pick on Cheryl because she's here. And so we can do it. It was just weird, a lot of things. And it was just eroding my confidence and my self-respect and my self-esteem. And it got to the point where, I mean, even my husband would say, why are you so down on yourself? Because everything, the way I looked, the way I dressed, the way I walked, it was terrible. And I think after that, I'd finally gotten to a point where I had some confidence and I was really happy where I was in my career, in my marriage, had my own office and, I was in the kind of shape I was in and I was just on the top of the world. And that's when I got, the rug pulled out from underneath me and having to hit rock bottom that far was really an eye opener for me. It was scary. It was terrifying. It was nothing like when I would be down on myself of, oh, I don't look, good enough or blah, 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 blah. This was so rock bottom that, I can't believe sometimes that I was actually that low and that I survived without really any help.
Yeah, it's funny. We have a saying that in Greek Orthodoxy that God will test you to your limits, but he'll pull you back right when you think you've had too much.
Yeah. And I felt the exact time that that happened, when it was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I'm done. I am done. And I was lying in bed, and it's funny, but it's not. I would, in the morning after my husband left for work, that was my time when I could cry, because nobody would see me except the dogs, and they would just hug me, so that was fine. I'd go to ballet class, I'd come home before I went to work, so I'd had time to cry there. And then when I got home from work, everything was just planned, so because nobody else could see my pain because they didn't see it before, so what's the point? So I mean, all of that pain, and it got to the point, how it eats you up. I mean, I've heard your story, and I'm sure your listeners know your story. It just eats you up inside until you just go, I can't do this anymore. I surrender. I give up. I'm done. And I just remember just lying in bed, and just tears were coming, out running down my face, the pillow soaking wet. And, one of the dogs was in my arms, and it's like, I give up. And I didn't hear it, but I felt somebody say, let me help you. And I was like, don't think that was one of the dogs. But that was the point where it was like things started to turn around. And that was actually even before, I think it was before I started NIMPO. I don't really remember. It's everything gets a little bit blurry back and then, but and we talked earlier about the darkness. And as I was going through all of this before NIMPO, I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of my own shadow. I was afraid of the dark. And my husband was in medical sales at the time, so he traveled a lot. So there I was in this house by myself with 6 dogs, because I had 5 Italian Greyhounds and a Black Lab mix. So I had 6 dogs. So I really wasn't alone, but I couldn't sleep in the bedroom. So I would sleep in the family room on the floor because it had a way out. I wouldn't be trapped in the house. And I could either go out the back door or I could go through the garage. But I would lay on the floor, and all the lights in the house were on. The dogs were packed around me. They're snoring, sleeping soundly, and I'd be awake all night. So I'd go for 3 days without sleeping and just, being on the floor. But something happened. It was probably about halfway to black belt. I think I was at the level of blue belt. When my husband would go, on a business trip, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I would slip out of bed, and I would slip out so quietly that the dogs never even knew I was awake. And I would start prowling in my house in the dark. And it was just one of those things that it was like, I own this house. I own this place. I own my power, and I own this space. And it was just really, I never even really told anybody that for a really long time, because I thought, oh, there she goes, crazy again. But yeah, it was like a fun thing for me to do, was to get out of bed and prowl. And then when I felt like I had enough, I would just slip back into bed, and dogs never knew a thing.
I think it's healthy to push like that. Like I push myself in different ways. I push myself to see how much I can take, physical stuff I can take. You know that. We had this conversation
Yes, I
before.
do.
I actually remember the last time I went to Fight Club Toronto, and I was begging my instructor for strikes, begging the entire class. I'm like, please hit me, please hit me. And it was just me. It was myself, another guy, and 4 other women. First time I've seen that. First time I've seen that. And I'm getting to a question with this little story, so just bear with me just for a little bit.
I got it.
At the end of the class, Manny pulls me to the side in front of the entire class, and he starts striking me. And he hit me so hard with the last strike. I'll never forget the expression on one of the ladies' faces. She was in horror of how hard he hit me. And I came back and I stood at the line waiting for another punch.
Oh,
And instead of him punching me, he made her punch me to get over that fear of seeing somebody get punched. She had to experience her punching somebody. Do you
mhm.
think that your story and my story, it's important for people to experience their fear and step into that fear so that they can learn there's nothing to be afraid of?
Absolutely, because fear is a gift. Fear keeps us safe. But as soon as, we're in a safe space, then the fear should be gone. But unfortunately, we do develop these fears that they hang over us. And if we don't address them, then they take more and more power over us in our life, our decisions that we might make. So being able to face your fear, I mean, just for me to be able to walk into that dojo for the very first time, I was so terrified. I actually, though, I had a little bit of a buffer because I knew that Mark would protect me and make sure that nothing terrible happened to me. And that's kind of the way things were as I was going through the lower levels. And we don't, punch real hard until you get higher and stuff. And we know that you can take it. Or the throws, for me, throws were just, we do a lot of rolls and break falls at the beginning of class. I never rolled in my life. I might have done a somersault when I was a kid, but they're doing all of these fancy rolls and cartwheels, and I don't cartwheel. Well, they told me that I was going to, and now I can. But all these things that it was like, this is so out of my comfort zone, and I knew that there was always that possibility of getting physically hurt. But in the entire time I've been at the dojo, which has been now 20 years, I did take a 3-year long hiatus. You asked if I ever wanted to quit. And one time I was like, I'm over this for a while. But the only injuries that I've had were self-induced or self-inflicted. And, one was a jammed finger and dislocated finger, and I popped it back in. And the other one was a slow burn. I kind of dislocated my clavicular, sternoclavicular joint by practicing punches and just, not holding back. Yeah, but other than that, it has just been so good for my body.
I'm laughing because when you said we start off with roles, it brought back a memory of when I started to learn roles, and it was not graceful. I
No.
did face plant after face plant after face plant after face plant, and
Yeah.
it
It's
almost.
funny.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's funny because the guys didn't understand how somebody who had so much flexibility from ballet couldn't roll. Well, think about it. In ballet, we're up and extended. I mean, the kind of posture that people envy, but we don't round very well. And so I couldn't get that rounding in my chest. And you did face plants, I did side plops. And it was so undignified.
I've done those too. More face plants than side plops.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It almost sounds like to the average Joe or average Jane that's listening that these people are like masochists.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody that, you're like, you guys just love pain? You love experiencing pain.
I would say not so much the pain. We love learning about ourselves, about our bodies, about our limitations, and pushing beyond them, how to push beyond them. And, if you think it does sound rather masochistic, and even, when I wrote my book on the ninja book, my very first editing, when my editor sent it back to me, she says, we need to talk about a few things because this really sounds like abuse and that it's been. I said, no, it's not. So I had to kind of explain it, and I thought I had done pretty well in the writing, but she still, this sounds like abuse and these men were abusing you. And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, that wasn't it. I mean, what's really funny is the guys, once we learned how to communicate with each other, got to put that out there, because the women that did come into class and train with them were a little bit different than me. I was the first one that came in that would excuse herself and step off the mat to fix her lipstick, to stop and say, hang on, I'm having a hot flash. I need a moment. Got to go fix my hair. And they're like, we're training here. And it was like, well, it's important to look good when you're training, right? And I didn't understand how to communicate with men who were like supposed to beat me up and pin me to the floor and all that. I'd been married for 17 years. I didn't know how to be friends with men. It'd been a long time. And once we learned how to communicate, which was a learning curve for both of us, we had so much fun together. And I have got to say that it was definitely, I call them the many magnificent men in my life. That's why I do not appreciate man bashing. If it were not for these guys, I would not be here right now. The way that they helped me learn and the way they played into my feminine wiles and my feminine spirit was absolutely incredible.
Was it like during training, they'd give you like tips and tricks and stuff like that?
They'd give me hints, and then it was like I would take off and run with it. Like for example, and at first I was doing this more for self-preservation because, anytime somebody would grab me and I would start letting them attack me, before they would, I'd say, remember, I'm small, I'm delicate, I'm just a helpless, harmless, middle-aged lady. Don't hurt me. And they go, okay. And I said, because if you hurt me, Sensei's going to kill you. And then, so, that, okay, be gentle with Cheryl. Don't push it too much. And then as I was getting skills and they would grab me and I'd say, remember, I'm a helpless, harmless little middle-aged lady. Be careful. Don't hurt me. And they go, oh, okay. And I go, boom, boom, and take them down. So yeah, little things like that. And then they started calling me something called kunichi or kunichi. And it was like, it almost sounds like a dirty word. What are you calling me? And they would whisper it every time they walked past me. And this is about the level of green belt. And they said that is the word for, Japanese female warrior. And I thought, oh, that's really sweet that you think that of me. But as time went on, they taught me more and more of the skills. And it was like, oh my God. It's really weird because as I was training and going through the ranks, I always kept waiting for another woman to walk through I wanted another woman. I wanted a higher ranking woman who could teach me the way of the ninja and how to even handle, some of these techniques and how to deal with the men and all that stuff. And I knew that this woman would walk in someday and she would climb the ranks and she would take me under her wing and she would be a mentor, and she would be a role model and an inspiration for other women who were like me, who were scared and terrified, who would come to the dojo. And I knew that woman would be there someday, and I kept waiting for her to show up. It wasn't until about the level of brown belt that I realized that woman was already there. That woman was me, and it took me several years to figure that out. But wow. Right?
That's wow. That's wow. Yeah, we don't have that in Sistema. It's just, you just come in, we play. I'll never forget. We all walked in and just Manny just said, "Okay, guys, fight."
Oh God.
We're like, what are you
That's
talking about?
horrible. No, I'd be out the door.
It was like, fight.
I'd hear fight and I'm going, what does that mean? Let me look it up. Is this a cat fight? Did somebody put ground glass in a point shoe? That's what I would think fighting would be.
Well, this has been awesome. We're coming up close to the end of the show, and these are the 7 or 8 questions I ask all my guests. And I just want to have your perspective on these 7 or 8 topics. With the increase in people suffering from depression from the lockdowns and all this uncertainty that we've been living in the last 2 years, what would be the one thing that you could tell them to keep their hopes up?
Stop listening to other people. Stop watching the news. Stop listening. Listen to yourself instead. Give yourself quiet time. Again, turning off all the devices. Go outside. Go into nature. It is so beautiful out there. And it just rejuvenates your spirit and your soul and can help you lift out of that depression and keep moving. any kind of physical movement. I'm not talking about going to the gym 3 times a week. Just keep moving, even if it's just a walk down the block. If you can find it in your, if find the energy to try maybe a Tai Chi class or something that's a gentle martial art, not quite like we've been talking about today, yoga, anything. There are so many movement modalities out there that can help keep you moving and keep you focused on that mind body connection. And that really will help.
What's the one thing that you do daily that amplifies your ability to stay focused?
It sounds really stupid. It sounds really, really silly, but I do it every single day. Is I get down on the floor every day and of course back up again. But getting down on the floor and the ability to be able to get down at the floor and back up again, just from a physical standpoint, is really good for your balance, for your flexibility, for your strength, especially as we get older. We all, if we don't do that, we develop a fear of falling. A lot of people, as they mature, they develop a fear of falling because they're never on the floor. But when you're on the floor, you can just, play with your dogs, just, play with whatever, roll around on the floor. You don't have to do these fancy martial arts rolls. Look under the furniture. You might find some things that you've lost there, but just get down on the floor and back up again every single day.
If you could pick up the phone right now and call yourself at 20 years old, what would you tell yourself?
It's going to be okay.
Looking back, would you change anything?
No, not a
Okay.
thing. There's a lot of things I've done wrong. I'm kind of like, that Frank Sinatra song. Regrets, I've had a few. No, there's no need for regret.
What scares you?
The one thing that scares me the most is becoming complacent. I don't think that's going to happen, but complacency.
Cool. Where do you see Cheryl Ilove International in the next 5 years?
Oh, I see a few more books coming out. I see quite a few more speaking gigs. I see me doing a little bit of, I don't want to say touring, but I guess so. Maybe just spreading the word of strength and courage and confidence at every stage of life, of never giving up. Don't accept the norms that society puts on us. And helping a whole new generation bust the myths of aging.
Very cool. How about you personally? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Oh my gosh. Well, in the next 5 years, I will have my third degree black belt. Again, I'll have quite a few more books under my belt. I see me taking more time hanging out in the mountains and doing more hiking. I also see myself hanging out on the pole. I do aerial arts, I do pole, and I have a lot of fear about certain moves. When we're on the pole, when the head goes down, it's okay if I'm going backwards, but your head going toward the floor is absolutely terrifying. So my goal within the next 5 years is I'm going to be able to do it with grace, strength, and confidence, and be able to just hang by one leg.
Nice. Nice. Where can people find more about you?
You can go to my website, and that is CherylIlove.com. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you have access to 3 audio recordings. I call them meditation through movement. So they're about 20 minutes long. It explains, some of the movement modalities that I do. And it's a nice way of just exploring this self-awareness of movement and awareness at the same time, somatic movement. And I'm on social media, LinkedIn. I mean, if you can't find me, you're not looking.
And we're going to post all your links in the show notes so everybody has easy access to your content and your videos and you personally if they need to reach out to you to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any final thoughts?
The last thing I guess I would like to leave with the audience is, again, I just want to emphasize you are so much stronger than you think you are. If you're going through a hard time, there is a way out. So many different things to try. Movement is so powerful. Again, you don't have to beat people up the way I do and John does, but keep an open mind and just know that there really is light at the end of the tunnel. And once you get through that tunnel, life is beautiful.
Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on the show. Um, I could have gone into deeper and a lot of stuff, but I'm trying to do a new little format. But thank you so much. Uh, you are the perfect example of resilience. You're the perfect example of getting back to it. And for you to come back to it to where you are right now, it just shows what kind of character you have, what kind of strength you have. And for you to be able to share it with your students, with your audience, I mean, thank you so much. This work, I know it's not easy work. I've been through it
Mhm.
myself in a different context.
Mhm.
And yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and sharing all your knowledge. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It actually, even though some of the topics were tough, it was really a lot of fun. And I hope it just gives your listeners some hope and inspiration that they can heal from anything.
Going through hard times is just a test. What you need to
Mhm.
know is that when you get out of whatever you're going through, you will be stronger than ever before, and you don't need to go through it alone. Always know that you are not alone. Stay tuned for more real people with amazing stories that are just like yours. Until then, to everyone out there listening, I wish you a good morning, good afternoon, and good night wherever you may be in this crazy world. Hey, everybody, it's John from Resilient Reboot Productions and the Fitness Oracle. Thank you for watching this episode, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video if you are watching this on YouTube or on Rumble. If you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast Breaker, or whatever streaming service that you may be using, please give us a 5-star rating and a positive review as it will help us reach more people that are suffering from mental health issues. Before you go, I'd like to invite you to join us on Pod Inbox. This is a great platform that we can keep the conversation going. Over the years, we've discovered that the best way to help people regain their confidence back of whatever fitness goal that they are looking for is to put together a tight knit community that will be here to support you in that journey. In order for us to do that, we are partnering up with Pod Inbox to help us create that platform and give you that opportunity to have your voice. So all you have to do is click on the link in the show notes and set up your free account on Pod Inbox right now, and let's hear your voice. Until then, I'll see you guys soon.